Hi, everybody, and welcome to our discussion of Chapter 10, where we discuss managing for sustainability. In Chapter 10, we will be looking at what businesses can do to address issues related to the global commons and sustainability. Please review the Chapter 10 learning objectives and the learning objectives for the week. This week, we are going to endeavor to know the main features of environmental laws in the United States and other nations. We're going to understand the advantages and disadvantages of different regulatory approaches. We're going to assess the costs and benefits of environmental regulation. We're going to define what an ecologically sustainable organization looks like and what stages that organization goes through. We're going to understand how businesses can best manage for sustainability. And finally, we're going to analyze how effective sustainable management makes firms more competitive and improves their financial performance. Traditionally, the government has regulated the businesses to protect the environment because business could not be counted on to do so. Interestingly, we have recently seen business begin to take the lead on many of these environmental issues, given the backtracking of certain nations in terms of their policies on environmental issues. The 1970s was a significant time in the United States for environmental protection, with the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and acts dealing with water pollution, air pollution, and land pollution. Slide 5 is a listing of many acts that have been passed to deal with regulation of the environment and business. As you can see, it deals with the primary big three: air, water, and land. And then there's a number of other specialized pollution acts that deal with endangered species, pesticides, oil pollution, things of that nature. Again, environmental regulations tend to follow the administration that is in power at that time. We are currently in a phase of environmental deregulation when we actually have a head of the Environmental Protection Agency who seems to be relatively opposed to many of the regulations that exist in that agency, and that agency is charged to enforce. Time will tell what becomes of those regulations. Air pollution is an area that, for those of you who were around in the 60s and 70s, and I don't know how many of you that is, I was and grew up in Denver, and I can remember living in basically a brown cloud. If you looked at New York City or Los Angeles, you saw a brown cloud. With the passage of the Environmental Protection Act and the enforcement mechanisms of the Environmental Protection Agency, we have seen air quality improve. Again, one wonders if we're going to slip back to smog, as we're hearing many conversations about increasing the use of clean coal. Water quality has also improved markedly over the years since the Environmental Protection Agency and the Environmental Protection Act have been in effect. Again, we are seeing an abandonment of regulations dealing with these issues, and we wonder if we're going to go back to the days of dirty water. Lastly, land pollution. This has become an issue in commercial development in that environmental audits need to be conducted to ensure that property owners are not held responsible for pollution on the property caused by previous owners. CERCLA, which is known as the Comprehensive Environmental Act, and the Superfund, which was created under it, exist to basically create liability for landowners that find themselves in possession of land with toxic materials poured into the soil. Think of land that was previously held for gas stations where the tanks may have leaked, dry cleaning businesses where chemicals may have been poured in the land, and that type of thing. There's a number of different approaches that exist that can be utilized to deal with environmental issues. One of those is environmental standards, and environmental standards are set by legislatures or other regulatory bodies, and generally they will set minimums or maximums for dealing with pollution, and if those maximums are exceeded, then there can potentially be civil consequences, or in some cases criminal failure to comply with those standards. Definitely a don't do this or else type of approach. There's also market-based mechanisms that can be utilized, and those things include cap and trade, which we've all heard about, where essentially we're trying to make pollution part of the cost of doing business. We want to try to reward efficiency in not polluting, and we want to punish inefficiency if businesses in fact continue to pollute. Another approach is information disclosure, and this is what's also known as regulation by publicity or regulation by embarrassment. Again, this is where entities are required to publish and make public information regarding their compliance with environmental laws. Again, one has to really wonder how much of the population would even pay attention to these kinds of disclosures. In the United States, sanctions have generally been through fines. These costs are easily passed along to consumers. Trends in other developed nations have been to jail offending parties, which may prove to be more of an incentive not to pollute. What are some of the costs and benefits of environmental regulation? We have seen that played out over the last political campaign. Those in favor of regulation will suggest that by regulating the old dirty energy, coal and oil and things of that nature, that we've created a new market in sustainable energy. Those who are opposed to environmental regulations would suggest that those regulations make our companies less competitive and cost people jobs. Again, there's as much of a political argument as there is a practical argument in this area. Slide 14 is a nice summary of the common arguments that exist in support of and in opposition to environmental regulation. Please review that both on the slide and in the text. With the emphasis on corporate social responsibility, and this is a good trend, we have seen some companies voluntarily take that extra step of moving beyond mere regulatory compliance to true sustainable management. It simply is good business to do so and can be a very much a product differentiator. Slide 16 depicts the three stages of potential corporate environmental policy, moving from pollution prevention to stewardship of resources to utilization of and creation of clean technology. It's usually an incremental process rather than an all or nothing process. A socially responsible organization should also be an ecologically sustainable organization. We will watch videos in the class involving a company called Interface Carpet, and in Interface Carpet you'll see a beautiful example of an ecologically sustainable organization. Look at some of the factors that went into play in that particular organization. Some organizations have institutionalized their sustainability mission via the creation of chief sustainability officers. This is an individual who's charged with looking at the footprint of the organization, the manufacturing process, what can be done more efficiently, more sustainably, and that type of thing. Like any systematic change, environmental sustainability within an organization requires management support from the top. There need to be clear goals, what are we trying to accomplish, and there need to be ways to measure those goals. Engagements of all levels of staff and alignment of rewards and incentives must exist when those goals are met. It's not simply enough to say, we're going to be clean, we're going to be green. It's important to measure what you're trying to solve and have good objective tools to measure whether or not things have cleaned up, and then reward people who have taken part in doing so. There needs to be a consistent manner of measuring progress. The triple bottom line has been one method of assessing a company's financial results along with its environmental and social impact. Oftentimes, private and public partnerships may form to address these issues as well. Going back to the concept of enlightened self-interest, or karma if you will, business can use sustainability as a marketing tool and as a way to differentiate itself from the competition. Again, look at the interface example. New technologies were developed that created efficiencies throughout the company. Additionally, taking a proactive approach is a good way to keep the regulators away from the front door. Hopefully, socially responsible corporations will begin taking the lead in creating sustainable production, sustainable products, and all in all, a sustainable global commons. All right, well, that's it for Chapter 10. We will visit with you again in Chapter 11. Have a good week.